Pepsi Watson, who is a good friend of Sean Atwood's, who actually just saw this morning. Sean said hi, by the way, Pepsi.
Oh, great stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and Pepsi Watson is a podcaster, YouTuber, and he has an undergrad in criminology and psychology.
I'm finishing it.
Finishing it up?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
in the final stages of it now, yeah.
Okay. And then you're also the author of IPP, the trilogy.
That's correct, yeah.
Awesome. So Pepsi has a very interesting life story. As I understand it, you were in something like 20 different homes or institutions over the course of 15 years. And you started out in that kind of environment relatively young. How do you remember the first place you went to? It was called Shepherd's Park, or
Wow, you have done your research, yeah. Shepherd's Bush was
Shepherd's Bush. Okay.
Shepherd's Bush, yeah. Shepherd's Bush was a secure unit. So in England, you have to be 15 years old to go to prison. If you're under 15 and you commit a crime that results in custody, you will go to what is called a secure unit. So the age of criminal responsibility in England is 10, which is actually the lowest on the continent, bar one other country. I think it's Switzerland or Sweden. And as a country here in England, we lock up more children than anywhere in Western Europe per 100,000 people. So that was the first secure facility that I went into when I was 14 years old, but it wasn't the first institution I was in. I'd been in 4 or 5 children's homes before that in the East Anglia region of England, yeah.
And what were your charges for over the course of the years?
It was my charges at that time when I went into the first secure facility were house burglaries or home invasions, yeah, of properties, yeah.
Wow. And I know that you talked about Aylesbury, which is kind of the infamous institution that you were at, and that's not for children though, right? That's for young men, or is it for adults?
Aylesbury, it's a notorious young offenders institution in Buckinghamshire in England, and it's for young offenders between the ages of 18 to 21.
Sean described it as gladiator school.
Yeah,
he said there's just like big dudes in there that are all trying to prove something, and a lot of testosterone, a lot of aggression. How did that differ? Was it pretty drastic from Shepherd's Bush?
Yeah, Shepherd's Bush, the secure unit facilities, which house children from anywhere from 10 to 14, you can actually stay there after your 15th birthday and not be sent to a young offenders institution like Feltham, which is another gladiator school, if you're really well behaved. But as soon as you step out of line, they'll put you on a bus straight to the young offenders prison. But Shepherd's Bush was Shepherd's Bush. It wasn't necessarily violent. There was fights and stuff between the children, but it was more kind of a place where you had like very damaged children facing very serious charges, like murder, rape, things like that, and it was very damaged children who were very emotional. They used to get very upset, and the staff there would be restraining them a lot of the time because they're very angry and kind of losing their temper and not able to control their emotions. Aylesbury was completely different. Aylesbury was, Aylesbury is the end of the road in the young offenders institution prison estate in England. It's the worst and most notorious young offenders institution with young men between 18 and 21 who've either committed the worst crimes in society or who are either the most disruptive young prisoners in the young offenders prison estate, and they've been sent there because they've become a control problem. Having said that, at Aylesbury, it's the prison officers who run the regime, and they run the regime through brutality and fear. So when you come out of your cell for lunch or dinner, they stand there in a pack, like 6 of them, 7 of them, 8 of them, and they stand there with earpieces and chewing gum, and they just bark at you. They don't engage you in kind of any decent civilized conversation. They just bark orders at you. Keep on moving, away from other cell doors, tuck your shirt in, don't look at me, 2 bits of bread per man. And if you've got anything to say to them, or if you look at them the wrong way, they wait for you to get your dinner and go back into your cell. They lock everyone up, and then they'll all come to your cell, all of them, yeah? And they'll open your door, and they just take their radio off, and the one that you upset or looked at the wrong way, he'll just walk in your cell and he'll say, "What's your problem, son?" And they're all on the landing, like 10 of them, 8 of them, and that's how they operate. And if you got anything to say or you start trapping off to them, they just fold you up. Wow. They just fold you up, and that's how they were running the regime there when I was there. And it was not prisoners fighting other prisoners all the time. It was prison officers just going in on young lads. And I would go as far as to say that those prison officers were sadistic men who got their kicks from coming into that establishment and knocking 10 bells out of teenagers.
And for the non-English folk, fold you up, that means like use physical force on the prisoners, correct?
Yeah, so what that means is being bent up or folded up. The correct terminology is what the prison officers call control and restraint, or CNR. So CNR, or control and restraint, is something that the prison officers learn in training, but that should only be used if a prisoner is being violent or being threatening to an officer. So what control and restraint basically means, in a nutshell, is that they put you onto the floor, they put your arms behind your back, they put your side of your face on the floor, and they bring up your legs, and they just put you in that kind of stress position. Here's the thing: if it's done correctly, it doesn't hurt. But they make you feel like they're going to break your wrists, and sometimes they do, and they have broke their wrists. They stick their thumbs in your throat or in your eyes. That's very uncomfortable. They strip you naked, and sometimes they can be laughing as well and mocking you, which heightens the experience because it makes you feel helpless, vulnerable, humiliated, degraded. And when the main thing about it, Addy, is that when the people responsible for your well-being are attacking you in this manner, it's very impacting, that realization that the people who are supposed to help me here are actually harming me.
I'm sure it does a number on the prisoners, like psychologically. How were there any guards that you had respect for throughout your time, specifically at Aylesbury, but any institutions that you were at? You're like, you saw a guard and you're like, it's a respectable man right there. Was any of those types of guards, or not really?
Not in Aylesbury. Aylesbury was a horrendous experience, which harmed me greatly, and as a result, I'd even go as far as to say is the extent to which the prison officers harmed me in Aylesbury became the extent to which I became a perpetrator of harm to others when I left the establishment as a young man. With getting older and going to adult facilities, adult prisons, I've had amazing, fantastic, flourishing relationships with prison officers. Prison officers have been instrumental in my journey of desistance from crime and rehabilitation and change over the years. Yeah, there was one officer in particular in HMP Wayland who had quite a strict reputation for being quite tough on people. And when I got my parole and he found out, he came to see me, and when I left the prison, he actually had a tear in his eye. And I think it was a case for me, when I reflect on it, Addy, is that as I went through a process of challenging my beliefs, systems, and criminal thinking, I became less interested in having conversations with other prisoners about crime and more interested in the civilized discussions and conversations with the prison officers, because they seemed to just talk a lot more sense. And they would talk about normal stuff like going on holidays and having wives and children and going and play golf and going to the football and doing all these things that I hadn't done before. And that became like attractive and appealing to me. And it got to the point that by the time I left there was only a small handful of prisoners that I would talk to, because I'd spend most of my time just talking to the officers on the unit.
Oh, wow. How did you challenge your beliefs? Because I think that's something that a lot of people would like to do, but just don't know how to go about doing it.
It's a great question. The reason it's a great question, Addy, is because the notion, the idea, the default thinking perspective that you've committed harm, so we're going to detain you in custody for long-term imprisonment, and the default result of that is that you're going to repent and change and challenge your beliefs, is not in proportion to reality. Yeah, your belief systems, your pro-criminal thinking, your distorted attitudes, your belief systems that tell you that it's okay to sell drugs and harm society, or harm women, or burgle people's houses, or rob people, and that's okay. You know, those kind of distorted beliefs. Excuse me. Those belief systems have to be smashed out of you, in my opinion. And the way that those belief systems were smashed out of me was through therapy. Now, therapy is remedy. I've seen miracles happen in therapy. I've seen men transformed within the group therapy circle. Therapy is something that is not done in England a lot. The small number of prisons where they were doing it on a program called the RAP program, all the funding's being cut. There is one particular prison in England called Grendon, which is like the Ministry of Justice, British government flagship prison, where therapy is the core of the treatment there. And men convicted of serious crimes like murder will go to Grendon, and they will spend 4 or 5 years there in therapy. And when you look at the recidivism statistics for men who've left Grendon, they're very, very low. Most men who do therapy there go on to lowest secure prisons and are the quietest, most civilized people in the prisons. And then when they're released, probably only as few as 2%, between 2 and 5% reoffend. It's highly effective, but it's highly costly.
Is that why the funding's being cut? Is because of the costs, or why is that? Your answer to that question is twofold, in a sense that, yes, the funding's been cut, so therapy is not offered in the prison estate in modern England. But the answer is also due to a lack of motivation from modern legislators to consider this therapeutic approach for prisoners, due to the fact that embedded and entrenched into the very culture of these secure units, young offenders institutions, and adult prison facilities in modern England is a culture of the infliction of child abuse against children and the disease of institutional racism, and above all, to answer your question,
a culture of as soon as you as a man, as a person, as a child enters this establishment, enters this institution, you are seen as subhuman and not worthy of human rights, not worthy of spending money on therapy. So that's why one of my missions as a criminal justice reformer and as an activist, not just here in England but globally, one of my missions is to educate society, Addy, that when we harm children and men and women in adult facilities, when the state harms them, then we in fact harm society. And not only do we harm society, we create a continuing conveyor belt of victims of crime, and we do not offer the structures that offer proportionate justice for victims that victims of crime deserve. If I harm you, Addy, and I know and understand and accept wholeheartedly that justice means different things to different people, but if I harm you, is proportionate justice to you me being locked up in a cell for 2 years for 23 and a half hours a day, developing personality disorders, self-harming, enduring catastrophic mental health breakdown, and then leaving with a drug habit? I would say no. Now, Norway at this present moment in 2019 is leading the globe on low recidivism. Their recidivism is between 16 and 20%. And what is their blueprint master plan for this amazing success with the lowest recidivism of anywhere in the world? They treat prisoners with dignity and respect, and they accept that going to prison, you've lost your liberty, and that is the punishment. And you go to prison as punishment and not for punishment. So modern Britain and modern America, I mean, they are light years away from this kind of modern thinking approach at the moment. Light years away from it, Addy.
That's a great way to put it. You go to prison
as punishment,
not for punishment.
Not for punishment. Going to prison is the punishment. You've lost your liberty. You've lost your freedom to go anywhere you want, whenever you want, with whoever you want, at any time you want. That's the punishment, and you stay locked up until you come out. But unfortunately, like I said, in modern America and modern Britain, you go to prison for punishment. And then when you're in the prison, you're harmed further, traumatized, harmed, abused, attacked. Some people get killed in prison by correctional officers, by prison officers, and many get killed in the American penitentiaries who've got severe learning difficulties and stuff like that. And then when you come out, the process continues. You're demonized. If you've got criminal convictions. And not only are you demonized, I'd go as far as to say that the whole structural way that the post-imprisonment plans are designed, they are designed in a way in modern Britain and modern America to make you fail. They're designed in a way to keep you in that revolving door of the penal system, because all over America, you've got communities and towns with the prisons, and everybody who lives in that small community or town relies on their job in the prison. So they need people to fill up these prisons. Wow. They need people to fill up the prisons.
It's like modern day slavery, almost. I mean, people just exist so other people can have better lives, essentially. I wanted to ask you about something pretty personal, both for myself and for a lot of my friends. We've been, I'm speaking for myself, I've been suicidal when I was in high school. I was briefly, and you have more than once. From what I understand, you've tried to kill yourself 3 times. Is that correct?
I've tried to kill myself in HMP Winchester in 2016, 2017, and I tried to kill myself when I was 18, 19 years old in Aylesbury segregation unit. And then I've self-harmed over the years, and I self-harmed when I was 13, 14. So two suicide attempts, and I've had other times when I've been very suicidal and thought about, seriously considered doing it.
How did you get through those periods?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I mean, in Aylesbury, I think what got me through it was the only way I could answer that is it just wasn't my time to leave planet Earth. You know, there's nothing I can recall that I did or, you know, consciously planned to do or, you know, took responsibility to make sure that I didn't die, because I was suffering so much. I was very skinny, very weak. The officers ripped all my hair out. There'd broken bones in my body. I had no water. I was extremely paranoid. They told me that they were going to make sure I ended up hanging from the bars. There was one officer in particular who was targeting me, and he'd come to the door and shake his keys at me. He'd come in the daytime, in the nighttime, he'd shake his keys. So when I tried to kill myself there on the taps with the noose, I survived, and I just got through it. I got, I got released from the prison. When I got released, I got a shotgun, a 410 shotgun, which is a small shotgun. I went to the woods. I planned to shoot myself in the head with the gun. And I remember sitting up against a tree in pain. And I remember I was so lonely. I was crying. I was in despair. I was very confused. I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know how to talk to anybody. And I ended up medicating with crack cocaine, heroin, alcohol, weed, prescription drugs, going back to prison. Cycle just continued in and out of prison. But yeah, it was very different. I was actually talking about this yesterday on a video about HMP Winchester. In Winchester, my mental health deteriorated very quickly once I went into that prison, because I'd been out for 6 years on license for the crime I committed in 2006. I was on parole for 6 years. Then I got recalled to custody for a parole violation, license revocation for failing 2 drug tests. I had a relationship breakdown and then relapsed into drug use after years and years and years of abstinence recovery. And my mental health deteriorated very quickly. It was traumatic and very disorientated going back into a prison estate after 6 years. The 6 years I was out, for most of that I was working in the restaurant industry. I trained in counselling. I did management and leadership programs. I was an established professional. I worked for one of the world's most famous chefs, Rick Stein. Didn't have a day off sick for years. And then going from that into prison was very traumatic, number one. And number two, what I observed going into a modern British prison in 2016, 2017 was something that I've never experienced before. It was mass warehousing of the mentally ill. Everybody was skinny, grey, gaunt. Everyone, most people were suffering mental health breakdowns. People were killing themselves, slashing up their bodies with razor blades. Trojan teams were coming in, riot squads at midnight to feed people. They used to put the bag of food on your door and then just open your door and kick it in, feed you actually, they feed you worse than a dog, because I never used to feed my Staffordshire Bull Terrier like that. I'd at least give him a pat on the head, and so they feed you worse than an animal. They lost control of the prison, and people would just be crying into the night. I went into a cell on the One's Landing, and I went into a really dark, awful place where I tried to hang myself. I was cutting up my hands and my arms with razor blades, and I just remember feeling this overwhelming pain and despair and intense hopelessness. And what I didn't eat for 8 days, and I had an emergency cell bell, and I was ringing it, and they were leaving it for hours, and I knew I was going to die in this cell. I just knew. I knew if I couldn't get myself out of this dark hole, I knew I was going to die. 3 things happened. The first thing that happened, a guy in the servery who gives the food out, he made the prison officers open my door and give me food. Like, he made them. He said, this man, like, he's going to die if you don't eat. And he gave me a cigarette, a cigarette, and they banned smoking. So having this cigarette and some mashed potato, it just gave me a little boost, Addy, and kept me, like, going for a few more hours. The second thing that happened, there was a custody manager, 30-year prison officer veteran called Officer Yandel, who just used to come in my cell and sit in the dark with me, and he never used to tell me what to do, but he used to just show me some humanity and some care and some love. And it's hard to accept at the time, because when your mental health is so poor and you're in that dark place and you don't like yourself and you don't love yourself, when someone shows you an act of love, you can become tearful, because you do not feel, in my opinion and experience, you do not feel like that you deserve that love. So I remember getting tearful when he used to come in to help me, and he would give me clean clothes, he would give me clean sheets, and he would just check in on me. Before he left for work, he'd come and check on me. And I'd go as far as to say that he saved my life. Like, I owe my life to him. I could have very, very likely died if he hadn't have given me that bit of care. And then a guy moved next door to me. This is the third thing that happened. Big, huge guy called Daniel Padden from the South Coast. Really friendly, really civilized, but he used to have, if he didn't get his Valium and his medication, he could kick off, and he smashed up the office and got 2 prison officers in a headlock and dragged them into the showers. And he used to make the officers open my door, and he would take me to the gym, and I used to train with him, and he was really kind. Like, he'd come in, he'd make the officers open my cell, and he'd sit in my cell, and he would hug me, and he'd say, don't be sad, mate, don't be sad, mate. And he would give me, he'd make coffee. He'd go and get some tobacco off someone, because there was bits and pieces flying around, even though that it was banned. He would be able to get it, and he'd share a roll up with me. And he would, like, if he had 2 sugar sachets left, he'd give me like 1, and he would come to my door like every day. And all these things, these acts of love, going to the gym, eating a bit better, sharing a cup of tea, and having some companionship, all of these acts of love nursed me back to health over time. I was in that prison for 2 years, and my mental health deteriorated 2 or 3 more times, but not to the extent that it did where I nearly died. So that's how I got through it that time, which was more because of others, the love of others, whereas the 2 times before, or the way I was thinking about it with the gun, and then in Aylesbury, it was just kind of a case of that the only way I could answer is to just say, like, it wasn't my time. It wasn't my time to go.
Wow, that's amazing. That's an amazing story, and it's interesting too that the guards seem to be the villains in these situations, in these institutions, but it was a guard who really helped you during that really dark time, along with that other inmate too, which was cool. And you said that you've struggled with addiction, and it says, according to my notes here, I don't know if they're accurate or not, but at 12, you were addicted to weed. At 14, to prescription drugs and amphetamines. At 15, to heroin. 16 was the hallucinogens, and then ecstasy. And then at 17, it was crack cocaine. Do you think that the reason you started progressing down that path of taking drugs is because of the people you were hanging out with, or was it maybe poor mental health that caused that, or why do you think that was? It just the nature of your situation at the time?
I think the progression of my drug use there, you got it spot on, Addy. Yeah, well done for that. You got it spot on.
I think you're the source for that. So.
Yeah. I started taking drugs and continued to take drugs because I was in pain. All addiction starts with pain and ends with pain, more pain. So I started to misuse substances to satisfy a desire, a need for love and belonging, which I didn't get at home in the family unit because my mother and father split up. And my mother was suffering with bereavement because of the tragic death of my grandmother, which hit our family really hard. And sometimes these things just happen in life, and they impact you, they impact the family unit, they impact the children. And so that's why I started to use drugs, was to block out pain. And then as I got older and I became addicted to harder drugs, I was using harder drugs to block out more pain that I was experiencing. And that pain was coming from places of my own making, really, by harming others, going to prison for long times, and then being abused by prison officers. That caused me more pain. So it just escalated into kind of a vicious cycle of feeling traumatized and experiencing trauma and feeling pain, and then medicating on drugs.
So now it's just tobacco and coffee? Because we should I got to smoke before this. So.
Yeah, just tobacco and coffee. I don't consider myself to have a problem with alcohol, but at this moment in time, I'm just choosing not to not to
imbibe.
Yeah, just not to bother with it. I haven't really got the money to spend on it.
Oh yeah, it's very expensive, especially here in London. We're in South London in Pepsi Watson's studio. He graciously invited us here, and going to the bars is very expensive.
Yeah, I was with a girl the other week, just in the pub down the road, and it was £13.50. I don't know what that is in dollars at the moment. £13.
It's like $15, I think.
$15 for a large wine and a Coke.
Oof. Yeah, that's rough. Yeah. That's worse than like going to a nice restaurant and or like a mid-sized restaurants. A wine is like $8. So yeah, that's pretty insane. So yeah, probably a good call on that.
Yeah.
So did you want to talk about, because I actually didn't know this beforehand, really until today, the IPP, the trilogy. Did you want to talk about that? I just don't know. I don't know what's going on there.
So IPP, the trilogy, is a polemic. So a polemic is an argument for or against something. So I wrote the IPP, the trilogy, during the time that I was in HMP Winchester on recall for 2 years. Now, when I said that my mental health got a bit better, what kind of kept me going in HMP Winchester was my ability to write. So over 46% of adult prisoners can't write, and large proportions of them have literacy and numeracy levels of probably a 10 or 11-year-old. So I was very blessed and fortunate and lucky. I was lucky to be able to write, because I started to write, and writing, it gave me a freedom. It gave me a freedom from the despair and hopelessness I was feeling with my mental health and doing an indefinite prison term with no release date, because all the other people in my position serving the IPP sentence, which is now banned, they had a similar sentence in America, 5 to life, which got ruled as unconstitutional, so they banned it. So it's like a life sentence with no release date for, in a lot of cases, in the wider spectrum, quite low level offences in the wider spectrum. So it's kind of like a government vote winning weapon that they use, and then they get in power, but then it causes great harm to society. And creates a lot of injustice. So being out for 6 years and going back into Winchester, all the short tariff IPP prisoners who were 10 years over tariff now, been in 12, 13 years on a 2-year sentence, they were all skinny, grey, gaunt, covered in self-harm scars, the light in their eye had completely gone, and they were carving chunks out of their wrists, throats, genitals, calf muscles, some are gouging their eyes out, and some are just cutting their throats and killing themselves. And I saw this with all of them around me, and I was like, this mental health is going to kill me. So if I don't, find
an outlet.
Yeah, but the way it happened, Addy, wasn't me. I mean, I was writing and I was sending like 1,000 word articles to competitions, and I finished second on an article I did on sex offenders. I finished third in an article in a prestigious competition on segregation, talking about the Quakers experiment and isolation in prison in America. And it was my friend Phil Armstrong, who's got learning difficulties which have blighted him his whole life and caused him huge difficulties and challenges in life. And he read something I'd written, and he was like, people pay money for this. He was like, and I was laying in the dark, depressed, and he said, you need to use this skill to help others. And that's where IPP, the trilogy, was born, because ever since that day, I just spent my days sitting there writing, and I wrote 40,000 words. But it was such a massive achievement, Addy, because for me to write it, I had to embark on a mammoth mission of investigative journalism from a prison cell with the only resources available to me, paper, pens, rulers, and pencils, and that was it. So I had to write. I wrote to over 400 people, organizations. I got every single fact and figure and statistic about the IPP sentence. I researched thoroughly why it was implemented. I went all the way back to the early 90s and the politicization of law and order after 2 high-profile children were killed and murdered. Excuse me. And I researched the entirety of the political background to the IPP sentence, and I basically put all that information into 40,000 words. But the only way, the way that I ended up with a printed academic professional polemic with a title and a cover and binded was because I'd write a chapter, send it out to my mother, she would print it up and send it back to me. Then I would go through it and highlight the errors, send it back to her, and she would sort the errors out and send it back and forward, back and forward, back and forward, back and forward. And it took me about 18 months.
Wow.
And then when it was finally done, I wanted to continue, but I had to draw a line under the sand. So I finished it. I set up an email account from within the prison that my mum used to run, and I sent it to over 300 people. I got 20 copies printed out, and I sent them to people. I sent it to people in the House of Lords, politicians, academics, all sorts of different people. And I sent it to every news channel I never did it to make money. I'd done it to raise awareness of what in my professional critical analysis is some of the worst human rights abuses inflicted by the British government on their own people, by any government against their own people.
And it was basically your objective was to raise awareness and try to get this IPP sentencing abolished? Or what do you think your objective was?
At that time, my mission wasn't to get it abolished. It was just I just took it day by day, and it just kind of materialized over time. I never sat there to write a book or a polemic. It just kind of turned into that. And
what's the basic gist of an IPP sentencing for people who aren't familiar with, because you said it's similar to the American 5 to life, right?
Yeah. Okay, so in a nutshell, all over the mainstream media here in England, we have journalists claiming they think that they know what the IPP sentence is and why it was implemented. We have self-proclaimed criminal justice commentators and so-called experts who continue to commentate on the IPP sentence, and the kind of common denominator narrative that is pushed on these kind of what I would regard to be state-sponsored propaganda, Twitter and Facebook machines by kind of senior HMPPS and Ministry of Justice and ex-prison service officials, is that the IPP was implemented for dangerous offenders. If you were deemed a danger to the public, you'd receive an IPP sentence. That is propaganda. The IPP was not implemented for dangerous offenders. The IPP sentence was implemented by the new Labour Tony Blair government to win the general election. And he succeeded with winning, his political party succeeded in winning the general election, tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime, political rhetoric, and the evidence of that is for all to see who has a critical brain. The IPP sentence was so astonishingly reckless and knee-jerk that at no point during post-implementation did the prison service, the parole board and the probation service ever have the resources to manage the devastating influx of over 6,000 IPP prisoners into the prison estate in only a 7-year period, until it got banned after the landmark ruling at Strasbourg at the European Court of Human Rights, which condemned the sentence as illegal, cruel and arbitrary. And the prison service, the parole board and the National Probation Service still hasn't recovered, Addy. And the only thing that will help them to recover from that devastating influx of life sentence prisoners, most of which shouldn't even be doing a life sentence, is retrospective legislation. But the current Tory British government are adamant that they're not going to pass the necessary retrospective legislation that will stop the bloodshed and the 140 ongoing, current and rising sickening death toll of this modern day barbarous act that is the IPP death machine.
And you said it got ruled as kind of cruel and against human rights at a European court, you said? And when was that?
That was in November 2012.
Okay, so already almost 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Almost 7 years ago, and they still, a lot of IPP families, they're going into Westminster and they're saying, like, please stop the bloodshed. At the minute, Addy, there is 2,500 IPPs who remain detained indefinitely with no right to release, serving Strasbourg banned and condemned IPP sentences. Out of that 2,500 who currently reside within the adult prison estate and high secure hospitals in England and Wales at present, over 70% are self-harming, as near 90% of them are over their tariff. They've completed the punitive element of their sentence, and they're just existing in this abyss of post-tariff IPP detention with no hope.
So what you meant by stop the bloodshed is the self-harming? Is that what you meant by the bloodshed? Okay, and by over tariff you mean they were supposed to stay in for, you said, 2 years, and over tariff means you go past that date.
Go past that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you don't have a release date, and you can only be released by the parole board.
Wow. So you said that we talked about how your experience with therapy really helped you.
Yeah.
And I agree. I think that's a really useful way to come to terms with problems in your life. And you said it was primarily group talk therapy, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. We do group therapy like 3 days a week, Addy. And I'd done group therapy for nearly 3 years. I did it for the last 2 years that I was in custody. For that five and a half years I was in custody, that period. And then I continued another 8 months of group therapy while I was released in a residential rehab, which is where the parole board released me to. But during that entire 3 years, I also had one-to-one personal counselling as well, which was transformational for me. But I cannot emphasize enough, Addy, the power of the group therapy circle, as opposed to the one-on-one therapy, counseling relationship. If you can somehow find the courage and to somehow muster up the faith in the process, the group therapy process, where you can take risks and allow yourself to be vulnerable, then the what's on offer is potentially massively life-changing. Group therapy is highly effective. Having said that, it has to be run by established professionals with experience. Yeah, so not a counsellor who's been around 2 years. That is not an expert. An expert is someone who's been doing it for 30 years. That is an expert, because otherwise it can harm people. You can re-traumatize people. Challenging a client in the group therapy circle is an art form. It's a skill. And if it's not done correctly, I can damage the relationship with you as a client, and that could potentially be irreversible.
Right.
And too many times and in too many places and in too many rehabs in modern England, because of the cuts, so they haven't got the money to pay top professionals. I see a lot of damage being done in group therapy. But where I did it in the prison estate, they were big hitting experienced professionals who've been around for 25, 30 years practicing their art,
Well, I'm not there yet, but maybe I'll have the courage to do that one day when I'm. I don't know, but I do find that it helps talking to somebody, and I'd hope that you, especially you, sharing that experience with the stuff you've gone through, that it prompts someone who's maybe thinking about it to go ahead and do it. And you said you used writing as an outlet for yourself in prison. How accessible were books for you when you were incarcerated?
So, to answer that question, I mean, my experience recently, 2016, 2017, nothing is easily accessible in prison. The prison service is on its knees. So the prison service and the prisons have mission statements. The organization mission statement, which is on the walls, and it looks really nice and pretty, and they have it outside of the prisons. So the mission statement of the prison service is to detain those sent by the courts and treat them with respect and help them to lead law-abiding and useful lives. But all over England, at the minute in 2019, every prison governor who runs all 125, 126 prisons in England and Wales at this point in time, when they come into work, their mission and their job and their responsibility is in no way, shape or form, despite the propaganda on Twitter and Facebook and such like, their responsibility and their job is not to uphold that mission statement. Their responsibility and their priority every Monday morning at 7 o'clock when they come into work to run these prisons is, have I got enough staff to prevent a riot leading to major loss of life, the murderer of a prison officer, or a high-profile escape? And that's the long and the short of it. So
they're not worried about getting the prisoners books or pens or anything like that.
You can't get anything. It's become virtually impossible to get a radio. If you get books sent in, they get lost or they get sent back to your family, or they just go into stored property. You put paper applications. These paper application systems that we've been using for 40 years to follow up, where your books are. Meanwhile, we're sending rockets to Mars, but in prison we're using this 40-year-old paper application system, dilapidated prison radios, 30-year-old big, huge fax machines like as big as this table. So books are very difficult to get hold of. In the library, if you're lucky enough to be able to get to the library, if you're not on lockdown, you might be able to get there once a fortnight, maybe once a week if you're lucky. The range of books is very limited. It's a lot of like criminality, drug traffickers, Reggie Cray, mafia, those kind of books. Not the kind of books, the educational books. Like I said, these systems, these structures are by way of designed to to limit your potential. And a great example of that, Addy, is that in the modern British prison system, they only educate you up to a level 2 literacy grade, which is the equivalent to what would be a GCSE at C or D grade level. In America, it's called the what's it called? The
Is that a GED or
yes,
like high school equivalent kind of?
High school equivalent,
yeah, okay.
that you pass at 16 years old.
Yep.
Yeah. So the top level that you can go to in the education classrooms in the prisons is a level 2. As soon as you achieve that, you'll be taken off education.
Wow.
And you can start degrees with the Open University. I mean, I'd done a taster course and started mine in prison, but let me tell you, they made it as difficult as possible for me to start doing a degree. They refused me access to a computer and told me that Open University degree, you're not allowed to use computers for that. So I was handwriting essays to length, doing, which used to take me 20 hours because I got to write it, make a mistake, rewrite it, proofread it, realize there was a certain angle I should have put in there, or criticize something a different way, analyze something a different way, rip it up, start again. They made it as difficult as possible for me to complete essays. But I got there. I completed a whole module for my degree just recently in 2017. While I was in prison, and it was a massive achievement under the circumstances. Wow. Yeah,
good on you, mate.
Yeah,
as they say.
And yeah, go. No, thanks, man. I appreciate it. It's nice to to reflect on that achievement, because I hadn't even been thinking about it until you mentioned it. And going back to the IPP, the trilogy, my mission. It's free. I'll send it to you on a PDF.
Yeah,
anybody who's watching, I'm happy to send it to them. I send it to all sorts of different people all over the world. Ask me for it, I give it to them. It's something that I've done that I want to get out there to generate awareness of an issue that's very important to me. But what it has done, Addy, it's given me the confidence, for me to achieve that with with those tiny resources. Now I'm out in the free world. I've got the confidence now that if I put my time and my mind to it, I could write a book, and I could become a successful author like Sean Atwood. And if I dedicated the time to it, I've definitely got the confidence now to be able to write a book. And there's software, that you can use, and I can type and I can write.
A lot easier than rewriting essays.
Yeah.
Sean said the same thing too. He said in you guys' podcast, he thinks you have a book in you, which I agree with.
Yeah, he did say that. Yeah, I remember. You're right. Yeah.
He said at the end. So I had a couple kind of blitz questions I wanted to ask you. If you could just answer them pretty curtly, if possible.
Yeah.
Just some random stuff that I like to ask people.
Yeah, fire ahead.
For sure. So if you weren't a writer, podcaster, YouTuber, prison rights activist, what would your profession be, do you think?
Do you mean like what else would I choose to do?
Yeah, if you weren't doing the work you're doing now, what would you do you think?
I'd have really have liked to be a doctor, but the way that my life is materialized, obviously that it's not possible. I'd have loved to have studied medicine. If I could go back in my life, I would have liked to have studied physics. I'm really kind of interested in the kind of the
just like how things work, kind of.
Well, just with all the stuff with Elon Musk, the visionary stuff about colonizing other planets, the fact that Stephen Hawking said that it's critical that we do that. For humanity to survive. So it would have been nice to have the knowledge and the educational background in that field to be a modern thinking in that fast-paced, fast-growing kind of arena.
Right.
Yeah.
I think for me it would have been NBA point guard for sure.
NBA. Yeah.
I got the right body for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this one might be a little obvious. What profession would you absolutely not want to do?
I wouldn't want to be in an office 9 to 5.
Oh, really?
Every
Okay.
day, yeah.
Oh, well, I wasn't expecting that. So what is a purchase of $100 or less that you made recently that was a very great investment? I suppose it'd probably be some studio equipment, huh?
Yeah, probably the selfie stick that I was talking about earlier.
There you go.
With the new P20, because I can start doing some vlogging. So I've started to doing some vlogging, like when I'm out on the road, and people have been commenting saying that they're enjoying the vlogging. So
Oh, nice.
that's something I'm gonna be continuing. And that was something under $100. Yeah.
Cool. Who is someone that has had a positive influence on you that you can never meet because they're no longer around? So someone in the past.
Dr. Martin Luther King.
You'd like to meet him?
Yeah, I'd love to meet him. Yeah, I try to meditate and tap into his legacy and his memory as much as I can, because that's an issue that's very important to me. And I think at this time, with the Central Park 5 story coming out, the Khalif Browder story at Rikers Island, and in this country, 26 years after the absolutely despicable and disgusting racist murder of Stephen Lawrence, which was a very high-profile racist murder in this country, I think, well, I don't think, I know, because I experienced it in prison, and prison is a microcosm of society. The disease of institutional racism in the modern British and American penal system is very much, in my opinion, active, rife, and thriving. And I think there needs to be a spearheading of a new breed of global 21st century civil rights movement, and that's something that I want to try and have an influence over. And so Dr. Martin Luther King is someone that I would love to meet if I could. Yeah.
So same question, but they have to be alive. So someone who has had a positive influence on you that you would like to meet and you still can.
Somebody that I would like to meet who's still alive would be Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle's
Power of Now, right?
Power of Now, yeah, all that kind of stuff, and New Earth. The just masterful way that he brought all religious scriptures together to produce the history of religious scriptures together, to influence him to produce these books, Addy, without ever ramming any of it down your throat. And I know a lot of his stuff is quite deep, but Eckhart Tolle is I'd love to meet him. I think the curtains would move when he walked in the room.
Yeah. Yeah, he seems like he's got an aura about him, just reading him. I read Power of Now, and then I actually gifted that to my mom. So that's the only one I've read of his, but I definitely want to get into him more. When you are feeling overwhelmed or unfocused, unmotivated, what do you do to kick the funk or to get out of that?
I try to keep things very simple. I try to, with nutrition, that's something I'm trying to work on recently. I'm trying to eat like fruit when I wake up, to drink water, to cut out like sugar, fizzy drinks, chocolate, all that kind of stuff. Try and exercise every day, even if it's just a walk in the fresh air. Try and talk to people like my housemates and people if I'm struggling with an issue. Ask for help, and just I keep things very simple to try and prevent becoming overwhelmed. And the most important thing I do, Addy, is to live in the present, because yesterday's gone and tomorrow's not here yet, and the mind's only ever in the two places that it's not supposed to be, which is the past and the present. So. And when we grasp that, life takes on a whole new meaning. When we grasp the fact that there's nowhere else that I'm supposed to be than right here, right now with you, on this podcast, and to embrace this moment, then life kind of takes on a whole new meaning. I don't care if it's a drink of water or a bite of food or it's just sitting here like this. I'm going to grasp the experience, the now, like it's my last moment on earth, because it could be, because I could get run over by a tube in a minute.
Yeah,
And,
hopefully not.
hopefully, let's hope not. Yeah,
And I'm gonna be on there in like half an hour too. So, yeah, I agree with you though. It's a good moment.
And just quickly,
Yeah,
I know they're quick questions, but
sure.
any fear, any uncomfortable emotion that I feel, Addy, any pain, any uncomfortable emotion, any fear, any frustration, is resistance to the present moment, and it's refusing to accept the present moment. So when someone contacts me, they says I'm in pain, I say embrace the pain. You know, all is well. Just be. Yeah. So you know, your mind, it doesn't define you. Your mind is not who you are. You know, that's why people shoot themselves there, not the kneecap, right? Because of the noise. Yeah, that incessant noise, the chatter of 1,000 monkeys. It just goes on and on and on. And the Buddhist monks who've meditated for 40 years will tell you the same thing. You can't quell the chatter of 1,000 monkeys. But what we can do is we can learn to foster or gain acceptance, the fact that they won't go away, and we just have fun with them. Yeah. It's not who I am. It's just a noise, mostly negative, mostly repetitive.
Yeah.
But with the mental health, you know, like you said, your experiences with it and the suicidal ideation, and, you know, it's very powerful, that voice, and it can take on a life of its own. And like it just did recently with Etika, the YouTuber, and he jumped off the bridge, you know.
Yeah, that was here, wasn't it?
That was like New York.
Oh, it was New York.
Manhattan.
Okay.
Jumped off Manhattan Bridge, you know. Just sad, man.
So going back to the books again, what book or books have you gifted the most? So what book or books have you give away to other people?
I've had about 4 or 5 different copies of the 48 Laws of Power, and I've given every single one of them away. And I don't have a copy now. And I've mostly given them away to kind of middle, junior managers in the restaurant business.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and signed them. And I said, you got to read this, man.
Yeah.
You got to read it.
Those are good people to read that, because I used to be a server, and that's a good call. I'm guessing there are good people you gave them to too.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. I regret giving my last copy away, but it's done now.
Were they softcover or hardcover?
All hardcover.
Wow.
I'd go into Waterstones, which is like the mainstream bookstore in England.
Okay. What's it called?
Waterstones.
Waterstones. Okay. I'll have to visit it.
It's quite pricey, but they'll always have, you know, the latest or the classic books.
Okay, sure.
And
have you been to Daunt Books?
No, I haven't been there, no.
Okay. I went there when I first came to London. I bought... It's kind of funny. I bought the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. So first time in a bookshop in England, I buy the biography of an American.
Wow.
Autobiography. But yeah, I don't. To be honest with you, I don't think I've finished it yet. But
yeah,
it's a cool bookstore. My family likes to go there. But 48 Laws of Power is a great book. And to be honest with you, I don't flaunt the fact that I read it, to be honest. Because like a lot of people, I was talking about this with Sean too. They have kind of like preconceived notions about Robert Greene and his books and what they mean. But I kind of compare it to like a tool, like a knife. You can use a knife to put on butter on a toast, or you can use a knife to murder, or you can use it as a stake for a tent, or it's like it just depends on how you use it.
Yeah.
That's awesome though. 48 Laws of Power was that book you gifted the most.
Yeah, fantastic book. Yeah.
And then, so one of my last questions, it might be my last question. You seem like you have had a lot of work to do as far as like learning how to be kind to yourself. And I think you're probably a lot more skilled at that than a lot of people are, just because of all the practice you've had. Right. So how can someone be kinder to themselves?
Someone can be kinder to themselves, Addy, by recognizing and acknowledging that when you are in pain, it's a lot of the time not you, the 40-year-old adult, the 30-year-old adult, the 25-year-old adult, the 50-year-old adult that is in pain. It's the helpless child who's been harmed in the past that is in pain. And that, again, is not who you are. So as an adult, you're not helpless. You are responsible. You can take care of yourself. So when you feel that pain, then you can go back and nurture that child that is in pain. How do I love myself? Well, how do I do that? Well, there's lots of ways that I can do that. But again, it's very simple. I can listen to my favorite music. Yeah. I was listening to music last night. I was listening to a bit of like old trance music, which I never really listen. Well, I don't listen to at the minute, but listen to my favorite music. I can watch my favorite TV. I can eat my favorite food. Asking for help is loving myself. Forgiving somebody is loving myself. Holding on to grudges is not loving yourself. That's harming yourself, and I don't forgive you for you. I forgive you for me. So I would say forgiveness is the most important one, not being able to having the courage to be able to forgive others. And it's okay. It's easy to love yourself when the sun's shining and there's rainbows in the sky and everything's going well and you've got some money in the bank and the sun's shining and blah blah blah. But it's when you're in pain that is when you need to love yourself in the simple ways, very simple ways. Having a bath, putting some candles on, listening to some music. Even just the way that you cook your food. Practice good effort in concentration. You're going to be putting that food into your body. Clean bed sheets. Very simple things.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pepsi. It's awesome chatting with you.
It's been a privilege and a pleasure, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your time in England. It's been amazing to meet you. I wish you all the best, and you're more than welcome in my home anytime in the future, and you're more than welcome here to the studio.
Thank you. Yeah, we should do it again sometime for sure.
That would be great. Yeah. Cheers.
Before we cut out, is there anything you wanted to invite the viewers to look at, like future work you're doing, or?
Yeah, just check out my channel, Crime and Justice TV. I just want to get a message of hope out of there. I'm fighting a lot of different causes. I'm trying to raise awareness of the global silent killer that is mental health. I'm trying to raise awareness of racism and child abuse that happens in not just prisons in America and in Britain, but in mental health institutions. So there's lots of different causes that I'm trying to fight against. So all the content's on my channel. Just subscribe to my channel and share the content and to help me get a message of hope out to people that suffer. Yeah, so we'll have all of Pepsi's links in the description, all the books we mentioned as well in the description. Until next time, thanks a lot, Pepsi. Pleasure.